Okay, so before I begin, I have to qualify the form of atheism I'm going to be talking about in this video and why I'm focusing my attention on it.
This guy's video claims that atheism destroys reason, but like most, if not all, religious syllogisms, the premises are all wrong and the conclusion is a non sequitur. So let's see how this one goes.
Because every time I do a video about atheism, I inevitably get multiple video replies from atheist channels accusing me of lumping atheism into one subset or just attacking a straw man.
When are you going to stop doing that then? Stop misrepresenting our position and get it right.
Obviously, not all atheists are the same or believe the same things.
Many of us don't believe anything at all. The one common factor is this: does the subject have a belief in God? In other words, are they convinced that an actual deity really exists? Yes equals theist. No equals atheist. That's it. That covers all atheists, every one of us, regardless whether we might also have a belief that no gods exist.
But this kind of atheism I want to examine today was adhered to and promoted by some of the most prominent atheists in history.
No, it wasn't.
And the comments I most often see from atheists on my channel are assuming the truth of this system of thought, which is naturalism.
Naturalism is not a system of thought, and we don't assume its truth either. We don't assume anything. We just accept what we can show.
Naturalism is the belief that only the natural world exists and that all phenomena can be explained from within it.
Even when physicists can't be sure whether the universe even has limits, why should we assume what we don't know to be true, like you do?
There is no supernature or the supernatural or dimensions of reality outside the natural world.
Well, there's no evidence of such things. Thus, there's no reason to believe in them, and further speculation about them isn't warranted. If it can't be indicated or vindicated, verified or falsified, then why even waste our time talking about it? When you can show us factual evidence or logically valid reasons to believe in a supernatural, then we'll consider it. Until then, you're the one assuming the truth of what is not apparently true.
And if we hope to inquire about reality, the physical sciences, which focus their field of inquiry on the natural world, is all that we need.
Wrong. I'm a naturalist, and I don't believe that. I accept that logic and reason may still be employed even when some empirical data is lacking.
And since only the natural world exists, we have no need of a God who exists outside the natural world because there is no outside the natural world.
We don't know that. But we do know that, logically, if a God exists outside of our reality, then it does not exist in reality.
And when I've addressed this belief as a form of atheism in the past, I had multiple comments and video replies claiming that this version of atheism is utterly foreign to them and that I'm erecting a straw man to make my job easier.
Well, if everyone keeps correcting you, then when are you going to learn and adjust your understanding accordingly?
Which I have to admit I was a little dumbfounded by, because this view was held and promoted by a whole cast of extremely prominent and influential thinkers such as David Hume.
No, David Hume never identified as an atheist, though his philosophy reflects that he was. He said that we have no choice but to make the same assumption as a baby or a beast would, that our senses do provide some accurate information about the environment around us, and that it would be literally madness to believe or behave otherwise. He also stressed that we should not assume things that are not evidently true, which is a fine summary of what atheism is, the philosophy that we should not assume things that are not evidently true. And that's where I think you're making the fundamental mistake.
Karl Marx, whose theories about history, politics, and human nature are astonishingly resilient and influential in spite of the tens of millions of dead people who were victims of those ideas.
This is a grossly inaccurate misrepresentation. We have to point out that tens of millions of people died under Stalin because of a famine that was caused by Stalin's promotion of Lamarckian Lysenkoism over Darwinian evolution, which he rejected. Karl Marx had nothing to do with either of these assumptions.
Bertrand Russell, who should need no introduction.
Even though Bertrand Russell explained his position explicitly, and it directly contradicts your claim.
Why are you not a Christian?
Because I see no evidence whatever for any of the Christian dogmas. I've examined all the stock arguments in favour of the existence of God, and none of them seem to me to be logically valid.
You hear that? Russell just clearly said that his atheism is simply that he hasn't seen sufficient evidence to compel belief.
John Dewey, who basically revolutionized education as we know it.
Dewey was a philosophical naturalist with his own theory on the fabrication of deity. Though he didn't identify as an atheist, it is clear that he was one, whether he knew it or not. I find that most atheists don't even know that they are atheists, largely because so many people have told the same lie as you do about what that word means.
And virtually all of the new atheists, such as Dawkins, Dennett, and Harris, as far as I can understand them, they all appear to be naturalists.
Yes, but naturalism isn't necessarily what you say it is. I don't know why believers have such a problem understanding non-belief, or accepting that some people do not believe. Don't try to turn unbelief into a belief in the opposite paradigm. You tell me that there's a magic invisible man who somehow psychically controls everything that ever happens, and I don't believe you. If I don't believe in your God, it doesn't mean that I have a positive belief in the negation of God. It might be, as it was for me for many years, that I just remain unconvinced, but I'm open to evidence either way. It certainly does not mean, or even begin to equate to the unprovoked claim that there is no God.
So please don't reply that this is an uncommon form of atheism. It is arguably the most common, which is why I primarily focus my attention on it.
No, it's not common. It's not even a thing. It's just another straw man distortion. I've been an atheist activist for almost 30 years. I'm on the board of directors of American Atheist 501c3. I know a lot of atheists, but I don't know one who uses the definition you give.
But I've also heard several replies that have claimed that atheism isn't a belief or a worldview or a system of thought at all. It's just withholding of belief in God or gods until sufficient evidence can be offered.
That is correct. Atheism means without theism, without belief in a God.
Which, okay, if that's how you define your atheism, then well and good. But that's not how atheism has historically been defined.
Yes, it is, ever since the first use of that word in the late 1700s. I'll include a link in the description to an article I wrote providing all of the evidence necessary to prove that that is the original and still persistent, consistent, common standard definition cited by every one of the self-identifying atheist organizations in modern day and by each of the historic pioneers who identified as atheists throughout history.
And the cast of characters I just named, like Russell and Dewey and Marx and Hume, they wouldn't agree with that definition.
Yes, they would and did, along with a few other historic atheists whom you haven't mentioned.
And I simply, forgive me for saying this, I just don't believe people who have entire YouTube channels dedicated to explaining their thinking as mere withheld beliefs.
I myself have a channel of some 325,000 subscribers, so allow me to explain. While the umbrella term of atheism refers to all unbelievers, there is a subset of that group, like myself, who also hold a positive belief that there is no God. For decades, I was an agnostic atheist, but then after decades more of concentrated study, I now understand that gods are not even a possibility to consider. Thus, I changed my position from weak atheism to strong atheism.
I've withheld my beliefs on a whole range of subjects like Bigfoot or UFOs, which is why I don't spend any time talking about them. The things that I don't believe in aren't of interest to me. I don't write books about them, and I don't erect YouTube channels to debunk them or the people who believe in them.
I bet you would behave very differently if you found out that your children were being taught in science and history class that Sasquatch and flying saucers were both real. And once legislation is being founded on these kinds of silly beliefs, you're going to take a stand against it.
I also don't identify myself with a term like a Bigfooter.
That's because no one cares about that. But throughout history, way too many kings and clergy have been obsessed with the yes or no question of, do you believe in God? If you do, then all may be forgiven. If not, you'll be punished in this life and, allegedly, the next.
But considering people do call themselves atheists, they write books about their atheism and publish YouTube channels and blogs all about their atheism, seems to me that withheld beliefs is the last thing you could describe them as.
Haven't you noticed that all of these works are really a celebration of science and or skepticism, truth and philosophy, or the importance of secular politics? That's what our atheism is always about. That and not being fooled into believing improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. Again, we're not the ones making baseless assumptions like believers are. You want to pretend as if magic is real and that mystical spirits somehow control everything with curses and blessings and other such enchantments. And you're determined to make believe that regardless whether it's true or not, and even when you know it's not true. Whereas atheists typically care about actual factual truth, and we want to improve our understanding. That means science. The only way to improve your understanding is to seek out the flaws in your current perspective and correct them. That means that our information has to be verifiably accurate. The only value any information can have is in however accurate you can show it to be. So if you can't show that it's accurate at all, then it has no value at all. Thus, virtually every sermon given by clergy from the pulpit of any house of worship is essentially worthless, baseless speculation. As Carl Sagan said, there are no sacred truths. All assumptions must be critically examined. Arguments from authority are worthless. Whatever is inconsistent with the facts, no matter how fond of it we are, must be discarded or revised. So you see, atheism is not any sort of belief, not even necessarily a belief in the negative.
And they might say the only reason they're putting so much effort into describing their beliefs is as a defensive response, because Christians are always trying to force their beliefs on others. To which I would say, well, now who's building straw men?
Still you, because the problem is that religious extremists seem to own and control everything at every level of state and federal government. Your boss, your teacher, your in-laws, practically everyone suffers from the same destructive delusion. Believers insist on proselytizing even when it's illegal and an unconstitutional violation of the rights of others to do so. For example, religious teachers in public schools are famous for lying to sequestered students about American history, world history, and geologic history, where outright lies told in defense of the faith are celebrated, while those who tell the actual factual truth are demonized.
Because forcing people to believe in Christianity isn't something that goes on anywhere in the world today. And if you could find instances of it, it would be the rarest of exceptions.
Wrong again. It happens all the time, everywhere, as always. Even in modern, predominantly religious communities, children are raised with the lie that they have to believe already falsified folklore, because if they do, then they'll get the impossible promise of a posthumous paradise. But if they don't, then they'll face the empty threat of a fate worse than death, in the form of the ultimate injustice from a God that we are supposed to believe is loving and just, no matter how evil the sacred fables say he is. And it's not just children either. Predominantly religious societies seek to persecute all unbelievers, calling us evil baby eaters and devil worshippers and that sort of thing, treating us as if one must be deluded by religious faith to have any morality at all. People have lost their children over this kind of misjudgment in family court. But again, logically, if I don't believe in your magic imaginary friend, then I don't believe in his imaginary enemy either.
It's also quite offensive to make this accusation. There are multiple genocides taking place right now as I'm making this video against Christian populations in places like Syria and Nigeria.
That's not surprising, since the Bible, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Bhagavad Gita are all about waves of genocides, with God playing both sides of the chessboard, causing tens of thousands of people to die on every other page. And not just that, but every one of the sacred scriptures of any religion endorses all kinds of evil beyond that, too. Slavery, animal cruelty, child sex trafficking. As such, ongoing violence is just another demonstration of how insane religion is and why we should all embrace secularism instead.
But there are no Christian populations murdering Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus in order to eradicate them or force them to convert.
Anymore. I'm glad that they finally stopped doing that after more than 1,000 years of unspeakable violence and atrocity. You have to admit that the history of Christianity is rife with Catholics killing Protestants, Catholics killing Orthodox, Catholics killing Muslims, Catholics killing pagans, and Catholics enslaving indigenous on the excuse that natives were not really people, but soulless talking animals in human guise. That was the Catholic Church's official position, according to 3 bishops in the 1500s. Religion has always been unreasonable, authoritarian oppression. Blasphemy, heresy, and apostasy have historically been capital crimes punishable by death via cruel and unusual means, and they're trying to bring that back, too. Just last week, Attorney General Pam Bondi launched a task force to find and crush what they call anti-Christian bias. There goes our freedom of speech and our freedom of religion in the same stroke.
But even if Bigfoot believers were somehow forcing everyone to conform to their beliefs, as someone who is agnostic on that question, that is, someone who has withheld his beliefs on the subject.
Hold on. If you have withheld your belief, that means you don't believe. At least you seem to understand that the term a Bigfooter would apply to you simply because you admitted earlier that you don't believe in Bigfoot. You don't have to proclaim the non-existence of Bigfoot. The question is not whether it exists, but whether you believe in it.
I would simply push back by arguing nobody should be forced to believe something they don't think is true or that hasn't been proven to them.
Exactly. Now, wouldn't it be nice if your God was that sensible? Because the Bible and the Quran both say that it doesn't matter how evil you are. All sins may be forgiven if you but believe. But if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter how good you are, because the only sin that will not be forgiven is the sin of disbelief. Both books describe good as believing and that unbelievers are doing evil. Both books say the same thing. So you're not judged over whether you're good or bad. No, you're judged solely over what or whether you believed. Were you fooled by the right set of lies, by the right group of liars? Because if you bought into the wrong set of lies and dedicated your life to the wrong God or the wrong version of God, then you'll be mercilessly tortured relentlessly by the ultimate evil in the universe, God himself.
I wouldn't be claiming that they don't exist unless I had compelling positive arguments to make such a claim.
While I actually do have substantial evidence and arguments against God, enough to say that there is no God, and that I know that there is no God to the same degree and for the same reasons that I know that there are no leprechauns, you don't actually have to have all of that. Because an unsupported assertion has no more credence than a claim that has already been proven false. You can't honestly say that something is true until or unless you can show the truth of it, the evidence leading to that conclusion. Sagan said that positive claims require positive evidence, meaning that if you say that magic or deities exist, then you are honor bound to substantiate that claim. But if you can't, then you should apologize or at least shut up. Because Hitchens' razor allows that what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. We're not going to believe you just because you say so. Stop talking out of your ass about things you don't know anything about. And this is important because faith is all about asserting baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact, pretending to know things you don't know. Now, religion calls that revealed truth, but in every other application, that would be called lying.
So I'm sorry if I simply don't find that convincing, and I don't think neutral observers should either. Atheism is the positive claim that there is no such thing as God.
No, it isn't. It was never that. You can find that definition in Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, but that article was written by a Christian, despite universal objection from atheists. At least the article admits two polysemous definitions, the other one being a lack of belief. So there is the misdefinition used by Christians like yourself to misrepresent us, and there is the true definition that atheists have always used to define ourselves. Atheism is and always was a non-belief in the unsupported assertion of impossible absurdity that is God. There were a few philosophizers in the 20th century who tried to change the definition from non-belief to belief in non, but that's been widely rejected. Anywhere but philosophy. If you're not a professional philosopher, then you would never use that definition. Because believers can't comprehend non-belief, nor can they defend their belief, so they have to turn unbelief into a belief in the negative, which is absurd, but then everything about religion is absurd.
And naturalism is the claim that all reality is contained within the natural physical world, and that nothing outside of it, such as supernature or God, exists whatsoever.
Again, no. Naturalism is not assuming or asserting unsupported absurdity that is not evidently true nor even possible. We follow reason, not faith. And we're not going to pretend as if magic is real when there is no reason to think that it is even possible.
And if that were true, then I intend to argue that reason would have to be denied along with it.
So your argument depends on this misdefined, misrepresented straw man. Correct your premises. Then we'll look at what conclusions can actually be drawn from that.